Okay, so here's a quick tutorial on how to use an existing V-Ray material and replace it with some other images that we've already found on the internet or created ourselves. That way it saves us how to figure out a lot of parameters because they've already been determined for us. So the best thing to do is think about what the material that you're trying to create is, and using a base material that's of the same type. So if I'm creating a stone countertop or something like that, I'm going to use a stone material from V-Ray. I wouldn't use a glass material, for example. Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm going to be applying a wood material to the floor in order to see how that can be updated. Okay, so first things first, let's put an existing V-Ray material onto our floor here, and we'll go in and choose a material that is suitable. Again, since I'm doing a wood floor, I'm going to pick something from the wood floor list, and I'm not looking so much for the color, but more about how the reflections look in this case. So again, it doesn't really matter what the actual floor material you choose here, because we're going to be replacing it. So I'm just going to move down until I see something similar to the look I'm going for. I'm just going to pick this one, and I'm going to add it to my scene. And once it's there, I can right click on it, making sure that my surface that I want to apply it to is selected, and choose apply to selection. Okay, then I can close this window for now, and as you can see, the material has been applied. And the other important thing to always remember with any time we're using V-Ray materials, not so much in this case because we're going to be changing it, but generally speaking, in a V-Ray material, whatever the size written in the title is, we need to be sure that when we edit it using SketchUp materials, we want to make sure that that matches. So I would edit the size here to match what that said. Okay, so 120 centimeters, for example, would be what I would want to do in this case if I was trying to maintain that material. Okay, so first now I could quickly render just to see how that looks, if it's still got the right amount of sheen and reflections and things like that. And this is satisfactory. I'm in a low resolution test render setup, so I'm not expecting it to look really sharp or clear, but I like how the light is bouncing off of it, not too sharp. It's more of a blurry type reflection, so that's pretty close to the way I want it to look. Okay, so how do we go about replacing those materials in our existing V-Ray material? We can quickly click on the right arrow here just to see all of the parameters that have been used. So we've got obviously the diffuse channel, which is the appearance. The reflection channel is active, as is the bump channel. Refraction is also on, but I don't believe that there's a map that's been applied, which we would know if these were turned blue. Since they're not, then there's nothing that we need to do with this channel. So the first thing we want to do is switch out the existing image, and I have created a folder on my desktop for the materials that I want to use. So I'm going to now find that image by clicking on the folder and going into test, and I've conveniently named it wood floor just for our purposes. So I'm just going to now select open, and now that image has been applied to the diffuse channel. Okay, so I click the back button, and now I want to look at the reflection, because I don't know if you can see it, but there's little lines on here that don't quite match, and that's either to do with the bump mapping or the reflection mapping, but I'm going to replace both of them anyway. So let's first replace my reflection map, and I can tell that there's a map there because of the illuminated checkerboard. So I'm going to click on that and find my once again, I'm going to find my test folder, and since this is the reflection one, I've set it up, and I'm going to replace that with that. Go back to here, and I can now apply the bump as well. Same idea. And once again, I've chosen a material already. And basically all that these black and white images are the original image set up in Photoshop to remove the color, and then I just adjust the contrast in order to highlight either edges or texture in the wood material itself. Okay, I can adjust this value here to more if I want to have the bumps, that much more accentuated. If not, I can leave it at the default values. Okay, so now let's have a quick look and see how our image looks when we render it with the new material in place. And once again, I'm going to have to make sure that my map setting is set up to match the picture that I've put in there, and the image that I've used is approximately a 10-foot by 12-foot image. So I want to make sure in SketchUp that I have those parameters set to the same amount. So if I can now make sure that my width is 12 feet and my height is 10 feet. Okay, that's not, I don't need feet and inches. There we go. And I can relock it and close that so that, not quite sure why it's so sluggish all of a sudden, but anyway. Let's do a quick rendering now, and our map should look a little bit bigger, a little bit more to the scale that we want it to appear as. And it might be a little difficult to tell from the resolution of the video, but we're much closer to where we want it to be. So now what I would want to do is go into my rendering settings and set this to something a lot higher in order to get a clearer rendering, and I might even increase the size of this just for our purposes so that we can see it better. And I'll do a quick rendering now, and we'll see how that looks. I've exaggerated some of the texture so that the bump or the grooves in the wood stand out a little bit stronger than the original V-Ray material, but again, depending on how you want it to look, you can play with those settings, and let's just see what it looks like. Give it a second here to render since I'm on a fairly high quality setting. I set it up to medium, and I can say most of the time you're not going to want to or need to go much above medium, simply for the amount of time that it's going to take to render. But if it renders quickly, even on a high setting, then it doesn't hurt to put it up higher. One thing I don't recommend is setting something up to a very high setting, because then it's just unnecessary, because we won't see visually a difference. Okay, so as you can see, if I zoom in on this a little bit, the grooves and the bumps in the wood are starting to show up a little bit better. Okay, so that's how we can easily replace certain maps or images within an existing V-Ray material.